Coming up, how the brother of the godfather of Britpop helped transform his siblings' composition into one of the biggest hits of the British invasion by channeling rage with a razor blade, slashing the guts of a cheap amplifier from a neighborhood music store, and creating something called Distortion. The story of the song of the band is next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you ever messed with the antenna on your radio when you were growing up, you know, get rid of the static so that you could hear your rock and roll more clearly, you're going to love this channel. It's total nostalgia. Make sure that you subscribe below right now to be a part of the stories of the song straight from the artists and help this daily channel keep going. Checking out our exclusive content on Patreon by clicking on the link in the description and see our new merch at professorofrock.com. Before we start, we want to dedicate today's episode to the world's favorite guitarist, King Edward. Eddie Van Halen passed away 1 year ago. Just a devastating loss that we feel all the time. He actually figures prominently into today's episode. You know, when it comes to the discussion about the greatest rock bands ever, you always hear the regulars, you know, the Beatles, Stones, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, The Who, we don't get fooled again. Aerosmith, The Doors, goes on and on and on. But a band that always deserves to be in that conversation but is often overlooked is the sensational British band, the Kinks. It's actually ridiculous that they aren't more revered in the annals of rock history told today. In fact, shame on me for taking so long to honor their impact and their greatness, but here we are. Singer and rhythm guitarist Ray Davies was a student at Hornsey College of Art in London when he was the front man for the Dave Hunt Rhythm and Blues Band. During one of the gigs with the Dave Hunt Band, Davies was bewitched by a very attractive girl that was standing in the middle of the audience. She really got him going. Girl, you really got me going. Now, when the band finished their set and they went off the stage, Davies hurried into the crowd looking for that magnetic woman, but he never found her. The infatuation he felt for the mysterious stranger was so strong that it lived inside of him for nearly a year. And it inspired Davies to write a simple song titled, "You Really Got Me." That was in the spring of 1964. By that time, Davies had left the Dave Hunt Band. He transitioned to the Hamilton King Band and eventually formed the Ramrods with his brother Dave Davies that turned into the Ravens. But now that you've shown your face, you've broken her heart. Now the Ravens morphed into the Kinks, emerging as just one of the most influential acts of the British invasion of the 60s, and maybe the most competitive time in rock history. You know, the Beatles, the Stones, the Who, the Yardbirds, the Hollies, the Animals, the Zombies. Well, no one told me about her, the way she lied. Dave Clark 5. Among many others. Davies constructed Really Got Me on a piano in his parents' living room of all places, up to the point he created You Really Got Me. Davies was actually not an experienced songwriter. You Really Got Me was one of the first batch of songs that he had ever composed. Now, the genesis of the song was aesthetically different from the version that became an international smash that was in the fall of 1964. Davies' original version was much softer and had a mellow, bluesy jazz feel to it. The style for the initial design of You Really Got Me reflected the music that Davies was into during that time in his life. He loved blues rock, artists like Leadbelly,
Flower every morning and evening before that sun goes down.
Big Bill Brunsey, particularly baritone saxophonist Jerry Mulligan. Now, Ray was a big fan of Mulligan after seeing him perform in the documentary film about the Newport Jazz Festival called Jazz on a Summer's Day. Now, the 12-bar blues figure that Ray came up with for You Really Got Me was in a very similar vein to Mulligan's work. Ray played the chord structure for You Really Got Me to his brother Dave, but the Kinks lead guitarist had a completely different take on what he heard. To Dave, the riff would be much more powerful on a guitar than a piano. Ray was a bit perplexed at first because he built You Really Got Me around a saxophone line, but he relented to his brother to hear how Dave's idea of a heavy guitar riff would sound. Dave supplanted the sax line with a fuzz guitar, as you all know, and it gave the song an entirely new kind of sonic energy.
You really got me going. You got me so I don't know what I'm doing.
The Kinks added You Really Got Me to some of their live shows, and the crowd went nuts. They just ate it all up.
You really got me now. You got me so I got me back now. You really got me.
Now, as we go into the rest of the history of this song, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, the glasses that I jam daily. If you go to Zenni.com today, you can choose from a variety of styles, shapes, and colors to really liven up your appearance. You can customize your eyewear with a prescription lens or non-prescription lens, sunglasses. It's your choice. Check it out today. Okay, so for many years, it was actually rumored that future Led Zeppelin guitarist Jimmy Page performed the crunchy guitar solo on You Really Got Me. But it was just a myth that has been proven false since. Before he was a member of the Yardbirds and later Zeppelin, Jimmy Page was a popular session player in the early 60s. And he did play rhythm guitar on a few early numbers by the Kinks. That's when Ray preferred not to sing and play rhythm guitar at the same time. However, Jimmy Page himself denies that he played on the recording of You Really Got Me. It was Dave Davies that invented the distorted guitar part for You Really Got Me, and Dave that performed that great solo. Dave created the distorted sound months before the Kinks recorded You Really Got Me at the IBC studio in London. It started with Dave experimenting with various guitars, but the experiments proved to be very limited to only tone and volume control. Dave then happened upon what he called a little amp in a guitar shop up the road a bit from where he lived. So apparently he opened up the back of the amp and sliced the internal speaker cone with a razor blade. Dave recalled that he was in the bedroom of his North London flat. He was enraged that his girlfriend at the time had gotten pregnant and her parents wanted the couple to get married. Instead of doing any kind of bodily harm to himself, Dave took out his anger by abusing his amplifier, a cheap unit called an Elpico. And then, when he plugged his guitar into the altered amp, it produced that dirty, distorted tone that You Really Got Me is, of course, famous for. The first major hit with distorted guitar. In a way, you could argue that the little moment of anger had a lot to do with the birth of both heavy metal and punk rock right then and there. Dave's inspiration for his guitar riff was actually a combination of Jimmy Giuffre, The Train, and The River. And the Kingsmen's rock and roll classic Louie Louie. Now, getting to the final version of You Really Got Me, that was a maddening process for Ray Davies and the Kinks after they met a major resistance from their record label to pay for the production costs to finish the song. Actually, You Really Got Me, it was recorded multiple times in the summer of 1964. The first cut was 6 minutes long, which, of course, more than twice the length of the final cut and what they would play on the radio at that time. It was similar to the slow, bluesier version that was on Ray Davies' demo. On the second take, producer Shel Talmy smothered the track in reverb, virtually muting Dave's lead guitar licks. The band wanted to re-record the song, but actually their label declined to pay for additional funding because the first two singles by the Kinks were commercial failures. How many times does that happen? Of course, Ray was livid, and he threatened the label that he would refuse to perform or promote the single unless it was re-recorded. And actually, Kinks manager Larry Page stood by his lead singer and also declared that he would not allow the publishing of the original recording. However, the label didn't budge, so Page and the rest of the management team paid for the additional session themselves. Ray later amplified the reason that he was so defiant, stating that as an artist, he was floundering, trying to find an identity in the brutally difficult music business at that moment. He was convinced that You Really Got Me would establish him as a songwriter and as a frontman. Davies was, of course, right on the money. You Really Got Me was the song that really broke the Kinks, and it was the catalyst to a reputation that led to Ray Davies being called the godfather of British pop, Britpop.
Don't ever set me free. I always wanna be by your side.
Ray humbly disagrees with that honor, of course, but the Kinks behind the lyricism of Ray Davies went on a serious roll after that huge success of You Really Got Me.
You really got me now. You got me so I guess it been.
You Really Got Me shot to number 1 in the UK, it went to number 2 in New Zealand and Australia, it went to number 4 in Canada, and number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100 here in America. With a classic lineup of Ray Davies on lead vocal and rhythm, Dave Davies was on lead guitar, of course, Andy Avery on drums, and Pete Quaife on bass and backing vocals. The Kinks had 16 top 20 hit singles in the UK between 1964 through 1970, including All Day and All the Night, Tired of Waiting, Sunny Afternoon,
Blazing on a sunny afternoon.
and of course Lola. You Really Got Me by the Kinks was vital rock and roll for many upstart bands of the 70s who grew up just worshiping the music of the Kinks. That admiration included a brash young group from Pasadena, California that, like the Davies brothers, featured two amazing musicians with the last name Van Halen. Mighty Van Halen. Just as the song did for the Kinks 14 years prior, You Really Got Me ignited the career of the great Van Halen when they released their cover of the track as the lead single from their enormously successful self-titled debut LP.
Don't ever let me be. I only wanna be by your side.
You Really Got Me was released as a single because of an encounter between Eddie Van Halen and members of the band Angel. Band that hailed from Washington, D.C. So the way that Eddie Van Halen told it, gosh, we miss Eddie. The way he told it, he said that a few months before Van Halen's debut came out, he went to the Rainbow or some other club, he couldn't remember exactly. And he had a tape, a rough mix of the album. And Eddie was telling everybody about it. And Barry Brandt, who was the drummer for Angel, happened to be there. And he invited Eddie to his house to go listen to the tape. This is actually from an Eddie Van Halen interview. So they all went there and they listened to it.
You really got me now. You got me so I don't know what I'm doing.
Everyone's just blown away and paid really close attention to the songs. Eddie thought it was very cool and was very proud of how everybody reacted to it. A couple of days later, Ted Templeman, producer, called and asked Eddie if he had played the tape of Van Halen's debut album to anybody. Eddie told Ted about everybody was there, including Barry Brandt. Ted Templeman was livid when he heard it. He told Eddie that he had just heard that Barry and Angel were in the studio recording You Really Got Me, and they were planning to put it out as a single before Van Halen, before the first album was scheduled to come out. Ted immediately got on the phone with Warner Brothers, and they rushed You Really Got Me out to the radio stations so that they could beat Angel to the punch, and they did do that.
You really got
course, the group Angel quickly fell into the where they now file. And Van Halen, fueled by the excitement of You Really Got Me, plus the first album and their other fiery tracks on it, went on to become one of the world's biggest rock bands, one of my favorites ever. Eddie Van Halen expressed dissatisfaction with the decision to release You Really Got Me as the band's debut single. Of course, he loved the song, but the way he said it kind of bummed me out that Ted Templeman wanted our first single to be someone else's tune. The late icon would have rather gone with an original Van Halen track as the lead single, like Jamie's Crying. Which in turn was sampled for the major rap hit Wild Thing by Tone Loc in the next decade. The reason I bring that up, I just love how songs weave throughout the ages, like the spider graph of songs. They're all over the place. Now, the late Eddie Van Halen would say about this song, and the Kinks for that matter, he said, and I quote, "The Kinks' guitar riffs would just tear through your car speakers. They sounded so powerful at the time, and they still hold up." I like their song All Day and All of the Night even more than You Really Got Me, especially that wood chop snare that rocked it along. I heard that Ray Davies told Guitar World that I did the riff from You Really Got Me better than they did. I don't want to claim it that it was an updated version, but it sounded more like a jet plane as opposed to a prop. But the prop version is, of course, the classic. End of quote. You know, I remember when I first heard the Kinks version of You Really Got Me. Just a little kid. I was probably, 8.
Don't ever set me free. I always want to be by your side.
I assumed it was a relatively new song because of how heavy it was. I remember asking my dad who the band was, and he said, "Oh, this is one of the greatest rock bands ever, the Kinks." I remember he said, "Can you believe this song came out in 1964? When he said that, I was pretty dumbfounded because at that point, what I knew of 1964, the early 60s music, was listening to oldie stations with my dad or his records. I mean, talking about like She Loves You by the Beatles.
She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah.
Pretty Woman by Roy Orbison.
Woman, walking down the street, pretty woman.
If you lost that Love and Feeling by the Righteous Brothers. You Really Got Me by the Kinks. It seemed decades removed from that sound. It was like raw and dirty, heavy and exhilarating. Not that those other songs aren't, they're just not the same. Now, Dave Davies called the Kinks originally You Really Got Me a love letter for the kids. I love that. But apparently, Dave disliked Van Halen's rendition of the song. He and his brother had wrestled through and comically shared an incident that took place after a Kinks concert when one of the attendees approached him and congratulated him on performing a great cover of that Van Halen song. Eddie shared what Ray Davies had said about the song, but beyond that, Ray Davies is on record saying that he liked Van Halen's interpretation because it made him laugh. You Really Got Me is undoubtedly one of the most influential songs of the rock era. It reverberated through 1964, shaking up the charts, lighting a fuse that would lead to both heavy metal and punk rock. Not only with its distorted guitar, but its defiance, its rebellion, and its overall attitude. What are your thoughts on this classic rock standard? What are your memories of this song and its impact? Share it in the comments below. What are your thoughts on the Kinks, the Davies brothers, and their career? If you like our content, we do invite you to subscribe. Check out our Patreon, check out our merch to help us keep the music alive. Very important. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.